Hi guys, so since tomorrow's going to be an e-learning day, I'm going to go over a few things on your study guide with you that you need to know before you read this story. The first thing we need to know is the term mood. Mood is just the basic overall emotional quality of a work. This can include everything, the setting, the subject matter, the language, all of this is included in the mood, and it helps set the mood of the story. For instance, the last story we read, what would you say the mood of that was? Personally, I think it was a very tense and suspenseful mood because I never knew what was going to happen to this guy. Okay, let's move on to characterization. That's just the process the author used to develop characters. Oops, I don't want it in bold. It's how the author creates the image of the character in your head. Now, there's indirect and there's direct characterization, but first let's look at direct characterization. This is when the author just flat out tells you, this is what the character's like. Indirect characterization is a little bit different. Indirect characterization, we look at the words and the actions and how other characters react and relate to the character, to the main character. And that is how we decide the kind of person he is. Like with Tom Benacki. We were never told directly, Tom Benacki's a workaholic. Tom Benacki puts work in front of family, and so on and so forth. But we learn that through his actions, through the things that he did. For instance, when he went, when his wife went to the movies and he stayed home to work, whenever he went out onto the ledge for a piece of paper that had to do with his work, we learned that he was a workaholic, and then he had his priorities mixed up. So indirect characterization, the author shows us things about the character. Oops. So, the author shows us things about the character to help us understand the character's personality. Basically, we learn about the character through their words and their actions, rather than just being told. All right, now we got that stuff. Let's read an astrologer's day. Ooh, right over here. The first thing we need to do, and sorry I don't have my tripod with me, I'll try to make this as least shaky as possible, is we're going to read about R.K. Narayan. As a young boy, R.K. Narayan had absolutely no use for school. Going to school seemed like a never-ending nuisance each day. He once wrote, Narayan much preferred spending time with his pet monkey, who liked to hang by its tail from the roof, and his pet peacock, who acted as a family watchdog. Despite his aversion to school, Narayan's family placed high value on education, but Narayan never changed his opinion that school was just too serious. Today, Narayan's stories are regularly assigned to students in schools around the world. That's irony, kids. Considering his unenthusiastic view of formal education, Narayan might have enjoyed this irony. The decision to be a writer. Respuram Krishnaswamy Narayan was born in Madras, India, and brought up by his grandmother. After graduating from college, he turned to fiction writing as a career. He chose to write in English, a language he was fond of and knew well. English was a very adaptable language, and it's so transparent it can take on a tint of any country. Narayan did not find immediate success as a writer, and once said that writing was all frustration and struggle for more than 15 years. His novel, Swami and Friends, was finally published in 1935 with help of British writer Graham Greene. Side note, I love Graham Greene. He wrote this book called Brighton Rock, which is amazing. Narayan went on to publish numerous other works. A literary voice of India. Narayan is probably best known as the creator of Malgudi, a fictional South Indian village that has been called a zany, eccentric, and at the same time true-to-life world. It is a setting for almost all of Narayan's novels and short stories, including An Astrologer's Day. Of his invented village, Narayan remarked, "Malgudi was an earth-shaking discovery for me because I had no mind for facts and things like that, which would be necessary in writing about any real place." Narayan's stories about Malgudi are often comic considerations of individuals trying to find peace in a turbulent world. Critic Judith Freeman writes that Narayan takes a Western reader into the very heart of an Indian village. The foreignness of the setting, rituals, and traditions may seem to us exotic, but the underlying humanity of Narayan's dramas can't fail to strike a chord. Okay, so as we're reading this, I want you guys to focus on the mood of the story and how the setting helps define the mood. Let me see if I can. Ooh. And I'll send you guys something to follow along. I'm just trying to get it as stable as I can. Punctually at midday, he opened his bag and spread out his professional equipment, which consisted of a dozen cowrie shells, a square piece of cloth with obscure mystic charts on it, a notebook, and a bundle of Palmyra writing. His forehead was replenished with sacred ash and vermilion, and his eyes sparkled with sharp, abnormal gleam, which was really an outcome of continual search for his customers, but which his simple clients took to be a prophetic light and felt comforted. The power of his eyes were considerably enhanced by their position, placed as they were between the painted forehead and the dark whiskers which streamed down his cheeks. Even a half-wit's eyes would sparkle in such a setting. To crown the effect, he wound a saffron-colored turban around his head. This color scheme never seemed to fail. People were attracted to him as bees are attracted to cosmos or dahlia stalks. He sat under the boughs of a spreading tamarind tree which flanked a path running through the town hall park. It was a remarkable place in many ways. A surging crowd was always moving up and down this narrow road morning till night. A variety of trades and occupations were represented all along its way. Medicine sellers, sellers of stolen hardware and junk, magicians, and above all, an auctioneer of cheap cloth who created enough din all day to attract the whole town. Next to him, in vociferousness, came a vendor of fried groundnuts, who gave his ware a fancy name each day, calling it Bombay ice cream one day, and on the next, Delhi almond, and on the third, Raja's delicacy, and so on and so forth, and people flocked to him. A considerable portion of the crowd dallied before the astrologer, too. The astrologer transacted his business by the light of a flare which crackled and smoked up with the groundnut heap nearby. Half of the enchantment of the place was due to the fact that he did not have the benefit of municipal lighting. The place was lit up by shop lights. One or two had hissing gas lights, and some had naked flames struck on poles, and some were lit up by old cycle lamps, and one or two, like the astrologer, managed without lights of their own. It was a bewildering crisscross of light rays and moving shadows. This suited the astrologer very well, for the simple reason that he had not in the least intended to be an astrologer when he began life, and he knew no more of what was going to happen to others than he knew of what was going to happen to himself the next minute. He was as much a stranger to the stars as were his innocent customers. Yet he said things which pleased and astonished everyone. That was more a matter of studying, practice, and shrewd guesswork. All the same, it was as much an honest man's labor as any, and he deserved the wages he carried home at the end of the day. So let's talk about this for a second real quick. When we look at the mood, we're in a very dark, or when we look at the setting rather, and how it helps the mood, we're in a very dark place. They talk about lights crisscrossing, open naked flames, lamps, gas lamps, no municipal lighting. So there's no street lights. And at the astrologer's booth, there were no lights at all. He depended completely on the light of other people. So this dark setting with this really dark bearded guy wearing a turban and having a spot of vermilion between his eyebrows, it kind of makes the mood scary in a way, almost mysterious. Mysterious is a better word than scary. And then we look at characterization, the way the astrologer justifies that he's basically conning people. And that tells us a lot about who he is. He says, well, I don't know anything about it, and I'm just basically guessing, and I'm really good at guessing at what people want to hear, but it's an honest day's wage. But it's not an honest day's wage because you're lying to people. Okay, let's keep reading. He had left his village without any previous thought or plan. If he continued there, he would have carried on the work of his forefathers, namely tilling the land, being a farmer, living, marrying, and ripening in his cornfield and ancestral home. But he was not to be had. He had to leave home without telling anyone, and he could not for the rest of his life, and he could not rest until he left it behind a couple of hundreds of miles. To a villager, it is a great deal, as if the ocean flowed between. He had a working analysis of mankind's troubles, marriage, money, and the tangles of human ties. Long practice had sharpened his perception. Within 5 minutes, he understood what was wrong. He charged 3 pice per question, and never opened his mouth until the other had spoken for at least 10 minutes, which provided him enough stuff for a dozen answers and advice. When he told the person before him, gazing at his palm, in many ways you are not getting the fullest results for your efforts, 9 out of 10 were disposed to agree with him, and he questioned, is there any woman in your family, maybe even a distant relative, who is not well disposed towards you? Or gave an analysis of character. Most of your troubles are due to your nature. How can you be otherwise with Saturn when he is where he is? You have an impetuous nature and a rough exterior. So basically, this guy says very general things, and the people listen to him and they think, oh, wow, he really understands and knows me, but he doesn't know him. He's just conning them. He's just saying the same things he says to everyone. The net vendor blew out his flare and rose to go home. This was the signal for the astrologer to bundle up too, since it left him in darkness except for a little shaft. Uh-oh, I gotta turn the page. Of green light. Let me see if there we go. A little shaft of green light strayed in from somewhere and touched the ground before him. He picked up his cowrie shells and his paraphernalia and was putting them back into his bag when the green shaft of light was blotted out. He looked up and saw a man standing before him. He sensed a possible client and said, "You look so careworn. It will do you good to sit down for a while and chat with me." The other grumbled some vague reply. The astrologer pressed his invitation, whereupon the other thrust his palm under his nose, saying, "You call yourself an astrologer?" The astrologer felt challenged and said, tilting the other's palm towards the green shaft of light, "Yours is a nature." "Oh, stop that." And the other said, "Tell me something worthwhile." Our friend felt piqued. "I charge only 3 pice per question, and what you get ought to be good enough for your money." And at this, the other withdrew his arm, took out an anna, and flung it out at him, saying, "I have some questions to ask. If I prove you are bluffing, you must return the anna to me with interest. If you find my answer satisfactory, will you give me 5 rupees? No. Will you give me 8 annas? All right, provided you give me twice as much if you are wrong," said the stranger. This pact was accepted. After a little further argument, the astrologer sent up a prayer to heaven, as the other lit a cheroot. A cheroot is basically a cigar. The astrologer caught a glimpse of his face in the matchlight. There was a pause as cars hooted on the road. Junctor drivers swore at their horses, and the babble of the crowd agitated the semi-darkness of the park. The other sat down, sucking his cheroot, puffing out and sat there ruthlessly. The astrologer felt very uncomfortable. Here, take your honor back. I am not used to such challenges, and it is late for me today. He made preparations to bundle up, and the other held his wrist and said, You can't get out of it now. You dragged me in while I was passing. The astrologer shivered in his grip, and his voice shook and became faint. Leave me today. I will speak to you tomorrow. The other thrust his palm in his face and said, Challenge is a challenge. Go on. The astrologer proceeded with his throat drying up. There is a woman. Stop, said the other. I don't want all that. Shall I succeed in my present search or not? Answer this and go. Otherwise, I will not let you go until you disgorge all your coins. So basically, you're going to answer my question or I'm going to take all your money. The astrologer muttered a few incantations and replied, All right, I will speak, but you will give me a rupee if what I say is convincing. Otherwise, I will not open my mouth and you may do what you like. After a good deal of haggling, the other agreed, and the astrologer said, You were left for dead, am I right? Tell me more. A knife passed through you once, said the astrologer. Good fellow. He bared his chest to show a scar. What else? And then you were pushed into a well nearby in the field. You were left for dead. I should have been dead if some passerby had not chanced to peep into the well, explained the other, overwhelmed with enthusiasm. When shall I get at him? He asked, clenching his fist. In the next world, answered the astrologer. He died 4 months ago in a far-off town. You will never see any more of him. The other groaned on hearing it. The astrologer proceeded. Guru Nayak. You know my name, the other said, taken aback, as I know all other things. Guru Nayak, listen carefully to what I have to say. Your village is 2 days' journey due north of this town. Take the next train and be gone. I see once again great danger to your life if you go from home. He took out a pinch of sacred ash and held it to him. Rub it on your forehead and go home. Never travel southward again, and you will live to be 100. Why should I ever leave home again? The other said reflectively. I was only going away now and then to look for it and choke out his life if I ever met him. He shook his head regretfully. He has escaped my hands. I hope at least he died as he deserved. Yes, said the astrologer. He was crushed under a lorry. A lorry's a truck. The other looked gratified to hear it. The place was deserted by the time the astrologer picked up his articles and put them into a bag. The green shaft was also gone, leaving the place in darkness and silence. The stranger had gone off into the night, after giving the astrologer a handful of coins. It was nearly midnight when the astrologer reached home, when his wife was waiting for him at the door and demanded an explanation. He flung the coins at her and said, Count them. One man gave me all of that. 12.5 annas, she said, counting. She was overjoyed. I can buy some jaggery and coconut tomorrow. And jaggery is how can I say it? Well, here. It's an unrefined sugar made from palm tree sap. It's sweet stuff. The child has been asking for sweets for so many days now. I will prepare some nice stuff for her. The swine cheated me. He promised me a rupee, said the astrologer. She looked up. You looked worried. What's wrong? Nothing. After dinner, sitting on the pile, he told her, Do you know a great load has gone from me today? I thought I had the blood of a man's on my hands all these years. That was the reason why I ran away from home, settled here, and married you. He's alive. You tried to kill? Yes, in our village when I was a silly youngster. We drank, gambled, and quarreled badly one day. Why, think of it now. Time to sleep, he said, yawning, and stretched himself on the pile. The end. So if your guys aren't picking up on it, the astrologer knew all this stuff about the guy because he's the one that stabbed him and pushed him down the well, and that's why he had to leave home and come to where he is now. All right. I will talk to you guys, Wednesday. But I'll see you Tuesday. All right. Hope you had a good weekend. And I will also provide a link to this story so you can read it on your own if you'd rather not hear my horrible voice and me trying to read this through my phone and stuttering all over myself. Okay. Bye, guys.